The village did not appear on any modern map, nor could it be found in travel guides, satellite images, or official government records, yet it existed, hidden deep within a remote mountain region of Eastern Europe where thick fog clung permanently to the land like a living thing. The road leading there was narrow and cracked, as if it had not been used in decades, winding endlessly through dark pine forests whose branches leaned inward, blocking out the sky and swallowing all sound. Even during daylight, the sun never fully reached the ground, leaving the village trapped in a dim, gray twilight that felt older than time itself. Stone houses stood in crooked rows, their windows dark and lifeless, many sealed shut with rusted iron bars as if meant to keep something inside rather than out. The air carried a heavy scent of damp soil mixed with something rotten and metallic, a smell that made breathing uncomfortable and caused an unexplainable pressure in the chest. No birds sang, no insects buzzed, and no signs of wildlife could be found, only silence so complete it rang in the ears. At the center of the village stood a crumbling square with a dry well carved with strange, eroded symbols no one could recognize, symbols that seemed to shift when stared at too long. Locals claimed the village had once been erased from history after a series of unexplained disappearances, but the land itself refused to let it die, preserving it in a state between existence and oblivion, waiting patiently for someone foolish enough to find it again. The traveler arrived alone just before dusk, his presence feeling almost intrusive, as though the village itself had not expected to be disturbed. He was an American backpacker who had crossed half of Europe chasing forgotten places, abandoned towns, and stories that existed only as rumors on obscure forums, yet none of those journeys had prepared him for the unease that settled over him the moment his boots touched the village road. The reason he came was a letter. No return address, no postmark, only his full name written in careful, deliberate strokes, delivered to his apartment thousands of miles away. Inside, the message was short and unsettling. You will reach the village before nightfall. Do not stay after sunset. There was no explanation, no signature, yet attached to the letter was a hand-drawn map so precise it left no room for doubt. Every turn, every bend in the forest road matched his journey exactly, as if the sender had already watched him arrive. He told himself it was a prank or an elaborate hoax, but as the sun dipped behind the mountains and the fog thickened unnaturally fast, he realized the letter had been right about everything so far, and the final warning echoed in his mind with growing dread as the first shadows stretched across the village. The villagers noticed him immediately, yet none of them welcomed his arrival. They paused mid-step as he passed, their movements stiff and unnatural, as if his presence had disrupted a fragile routine that had been repeated the same way for generations. Their eyes rarely met his. When they did, they were clouded with fear, exhaustion, and something deeper, resignation. Conversations died the moment he approached, replaced by uneasy silence broken only by hurried footsteps and the soft creak of old doors being shut. He heard whispers carried by the fog, fragments of words in a dialect he did not recognize, always stopping abruptly whenever he turned his head. When he asked for directions or simply tried to greet them, most pretended not to hear, while others crossed themselves or muttered protective prayers under their breath. One elderly woman, her face lined with age and terror, finally spoke, but only to warn him in a trembling voice never to speak the village's name aloud, especially after dark. The way she hurried away afterward, glancing over her shoulder as though something was listening, made it clear that the villagers' fear was not of him, but of what might punish them for acknowledging his presence at all. With no one willing to guide him, the traveler eventually found shelter in what appeared to be the village's only inn, a massive stone building crouched at the edge of the square like a relic left behind by time. Its wooden sign hung crooked, the name long scraped away, and the front door groaned in protest when he pushed it open, releasing a wave of cold, stale air that smelled of dust and decay. Inside, the interior was dimly lit by flickering oil lamps, casting long warped shadows across the walls that seemed to move even when he stood still. The most unsettling detail, however, was the mirrors. Every single one of them, from the hallway to the dining room, had been carefully covered with heavy black cloth, secured tightly as if someone feared what might be reflected back. The innkeeper never appeared, yet a key rested neatly on the counter with a room number already written beside it, as though his arrival had been expected. Floorboards creaked under his weight, each step echoing too loudly in the silence, and he could not shake the feeling that the building was not abandoned at all, but watching him quietly, patiently, waiting for night to fully claim the village. Night fell unnaturally fast, as if the remaining daylight had been pulled out of the sky, and with it came a sound that made the traveler freeze in place. Somewhere beyond the thick fog, a church bell began to ring, slow, heavy tolls that vibrated through the stone walls of the inn and settled deep in his bones. The sound was wrong. It did not echo the way a bell should, nor did it fade with distance. Instead, each toll seemed closer than the last, as though the source was slowly circling the village. Earlier, he had noticed the church near the square, a roofless ruin with collapsed walls and no bell tower, no ropes, no visible place where a bell could possibly hang. Yet the ringing continued, perfectly timed, counting something he could not understand. Between the tolls, there were moments of absolute silence so complete it felt suffocating, followed by a faint vibration beneath the floorboards, like something massive shifting deep underground. He checked his watch, but the second hand had stopped moving the moment the bells began, leaving him with the growing certainty that time itself behaved differently here once the sun went down. When morning finally came, it brought no comfort, only another layer of unease. Pale gray light filtered weakly through the fog, revealing deep, fresh scratches carved into the wooden door of his room, long gouges that had not been there the night before. They were too precise to be the work of animals, evenly spaced and dragged downward as if something tall had stood upright, testing the strength of the wood with deliberate patience. Splinters littered the floor, and the doorframe itself was slightly warped, as though it had been forced outward from the other side. As he stepped into the hallway, he saw similar marks on other doors along the corridor, all stopping just inches from the handles, as if whatever made them understood exactly how close it could come without entering. No footprints appeared in the dust, no sign of a struggle, and no explanation offered itself. The inn remained silent, empty, and indifferent, yet the message was clear. Something had come in the night, something aware of his presence, and it had not been trying to get inside, it had been letting him know that escape was no longer an option. Disturbed and desperate for answers, the traveler searched the inn for anything that might explain what was happening, eventually discovering a narrow staircase hidden behind a rotting storage door that led down into the basement. The air grew colder with every step, thick with dust and the sour smell of mold, until his flashlight beam landed on a small wooden chest shoved into the far corner. Inside, he found an old diary bound in cracked leather, its pages yellowed and brittle, yet meticulously preserved. The handwriting changed from entry to entry, written by different people across decades, all of them travelers like himself, foreigners who had stumbled upon the village by accident or curiosity. Each account described the same sequence of events: the fog, the warnings, the bells, the scratches at night. Dates were carefully recorded, and his pulse quickened when he noticed that every story ended on the exact same day of the year, always with the final entries growing frantic, the words smeared with ink as if written in terror. Some entries ended mid-sentence, others with desperate pleas for forgiveness, but none described leaving the village. As he turned the last page, he realized the most horrifying detail of all. The final entry was blank, except for today's date already written at the top, waiting patiently for his story to be finished. As he read deeper into the diary, a pattern emerged that made his hands tremble. The fragmented entries, when pieced together, spoke of something buried beneath the village, something ancient that the ground itself had been forced to contain. The writers described it not as a demon or a ghost, but as a presence older than names, one that did not hunt or chase but waited, listening through the soil. According to the diary, the villagers believed the entity could not be destroyed, only fed, and that once every full moon, an offering was required to keep it sleeping. At first, the sacrifices were animals, then outsiders, and eventually anyone unlucky enough to be present when the time came. The ground would open briefly, just enough to accept what was given, before sealing itself again as if nothing had happened. One entry warned that when the village failed to provide an offering, the thing below would choose for itself, reaching upward through walls, doors, and dreams. As the traveler finished reading, he felt a faint vibration beneath his feet, slow and rhythmic, like a massive heartbeat pulsing far below the basement floor, confirming with terrifying certainty that whatever the diary described was not a legend. It was still alive, and it knew it was hungry. That night, unable to sleep, the traveler noticed a strange glow seeping through the cracks of the inn's boarded windows. Carefully pulling the curtain aside, he saw figures moving through the fog, villagers emerging silently from their homes, each carrying a lantern that burned with a dull reddish light instead of flame. Their faces were expressionless, eyes fixed forward, as if guided by something unseen. One by one, they gathered in the village square without speaking, forming a slow, deliberate procession that headed toward the forest at the edge of the village. The traveler followed at a distance, his footsteps muffled by the damp earth, heart pounding as the bells began to ring again, now softer, almost reverent. The deeper they went, the thicker the fog became, swallowing the lantern light and twisting the shadows into unnatural shapes. None of the villagers looked back, yet he had the unsettling feeling they knew he was there, that his presence had already been counted among them, and that this silent march was not a ritual he was meant to observe, but one he was meant to complete. The procession descended into a clearing where the forest floor had collapsed inward, revealing a network of ancient tunnels reinforced with stone and bone. As the villagers vanished one by one into the darkness below, the traveler crouched at the edge, listening as the air filled with a low, vibrating hum that seemed to come from the earth itself. Then the screams began, raw human cries echoing through the tunnels, distorted and multiplied until it was impossible to tell how many voices were suffering at once. The sound clawed at his mind, rising in pitch and desperation, before cutting off abruptly, replaced by a silence so sudden it felt violent. In that stillness, he heard something else. A wet, grinding movement far beneath the screams, slow and deliberate, followed by a deep exhale that rattled the ground. The villagers eventually emerged from the tunnels, their lanterns extinguished, their faces pale and hollow, and without a word, they dispersed back toward the village, leaving the traveler alone with the unbearable certainty that whatever had been fed below was not satisfied, it was merely waiting. As the traveler turned to leave the clearing, a small figure stepped out from behind a twisted tree, blocking his path without making a sound. It was a child, no older than 7, barefoot and dressed in clothes far too thin for the cold, yet standing unnaturally still amid the fog. When the traveler lowered his flashlight, his breath caught. The child's eyes were completely hollow, dark pits that reflected no light, no life. In a calm voice that did not match its age, the child spoke his full name, pronouncing it perfectly despite never being told. It warned him that the ground was awake now, that it could hear thoughts and remember footsteps, and that once someone was noticed, they could never truly leave. The child tilted its head slightly and whispered that the village did not choose sacrifices anymore, the earth did, and it had already learned the traveler's scent. Before he could ask anything, the child stepped backward into the fog and vanished, leaving behind only faint footprints that slowly sank into the soil on their own, as if the ground itself was swallowing the last trace of the warning. Shaken and desperate to regain some sense of control, the traveler returned to the inn and retrieved the letter that had brought him there, studying it under the dim lamp as though seeing it for the first time. That was when he noticed something impossible. The handwriting, which he had initially dismissed as neat and unfamiliar, was undeniably his own. Every curve, every pressure mark of the pen matched the way he had written his name since childhood. His hands began to shake as he unfolded the paper completely and saw a detail he had somehow overlooked. A date written faintly in the corner, several days in the future. The message had not been a warning from someone else, but a reminder from himself. Suddenly, memories surfaced that did not feel like memories at all. Fragmented images of him writing the letter in panic, ink smearing as the ground trembled beneath him, the sound of bells echoing too close. He realized with growing horror that time in the village did not move forward in a straight line, and that he had already been here before, trapped in a cycle he could not remember, leaving warnings for himself that he would never truly understand until it was too late. As the full moon rose high above the village, an unnatural warmth began to spread through the inn, replacing the cold that had clung to the stone walls since his arrival. The traveler watched in horror as dark stains slowly seeped through the cracks between the stones, at first resembling damp patches before deepening into a thick, unmistakable red. The walls pulsed faintly, expanding and contracting as if the building itself were breathing, and a metallic stench filled the air, making his stomach churn. Drops fell from the ceiling, splattering onto the floor in slow, deliberate rhythms that matched the deep vibrations coming from beneath the ground. When he touched the wall, it was warm and slick, and at his contact, a faint handprint emerged from within the stone, pressing outward from the other side as if something trapped inside was trying to reach him. The inn groaned and shifted, its foundations trembling under the strain, and he understood that the village was no longer merely a place. It had become part of the creature below, a living extension of its hunger, and it was opening itself to claim what it was owed. The chanting began softly at first, barely audible through the thick stone walls, but it grew louder and more synchronized with each passing second until the words vibrated through the inn like a relentless pulse. Peering through a narrow gap in the shutters, the traveler saw the villagers gathered outside, forming a wide circle around the building, their lanterns raised high and casting distorted shadows that twisted unnaturally across the ground. Their voices blended into a single droning chorus spoken in a harsh, ancient language that scraped against the ears, older than any prayer he recognized, stripped of comfort or mercy. As they chanted, symbols carved into the stones of the inn began to glow faintly, revealing markings he now recognized from the diary, seals meant to bind, not protect. The villagers' faces showed no anger, no malice, only grim acceptance, as if they were performing a duty passed down through countless generations. He realized then that the inn had never been a refuge for travelers. It was a holding place designed to keep the chosen offering contained until the earth itself was ready to claim them. With a thunderous crack that split the night, the ground beneath the village began to tear itself open, stone and soil grinding apart as if pulled by invisible hands. The traveler stumbled as the earth heaved, and from the widening fissure rose something colossal and obscene, a shape that defied natural form. It was made of compacted bone, roots, and wet soil, fused together into a towering mass that pulsed with slow, deliberate movement. Fragments of skulls and rib cages jutted from its surface, some still bearing scraps of clothing, their hollow sockets glowing faintly as if awareness lingered within them. The creature did not roar or thrash. It simply emerged, exhaling a breath that smelled of graves and centuries of decay, and the air grew heavy with the weight of its presence. As it rose higher, the traveler felt an overwhelming pressure in his mind, not a voice but a demand, an ancient certainty that something had been promised and the debt was long overdue. One by one, the villagers dropped to their knees around the earth, pressing their foreheads into the dirt as if facing a god they both feared and depended upon. From within the crowd, two figures were brought forward, their faces hidden beneath heavy cloaks, their movements sluggish and defeated. The traveler watched in numb horror as the cloaks were pulled away, revealing outsiders, people who, like him, had once arrived driven by curiosity and disbelief. No prayers were offered for them, no resistance allowed. The villagers simply guided the victims toward the edge of the fissure with practiced efficiency. When they were pushed forward, the ground seemed to soften, swallowing them whole without blood or struggle, closing around their bodies as though welcoming them home. The creature shuddered in response, its massive form settling slightly back into the earth, and the chanting ceased, replaced by exhausted silence. Only then did the traveler understand the villagers' grim truth. Sacrifice was not cruelty to them but survival, and tonight the ground would not settle for just two. Driven by panic, the traveler ran, abandoning all sense of direction as he fled through the narrow streets of the village, the ground still trembling beneath his feet. He reached the road he had arrived on, only to find it stretching unnaturally long, the forest on either side pressing inward as if closing a wound. No matter how far he ran, familiar landmarks reappeared, the same broken cart, the same twisted tree, the same stone marker, each time depositing him back at the edge of the village square. His lungs burned, his legs weakened, yet the village remained unchanged, patient and unmoving, as though it were allowing him to exhaust himself. The bells began to ring again, closer now, their rhythm mocking his desperation. He realized with sinking dread that escape was not a matter of distance or direction. The village did not exist within the world he came from anymore, and once claimed, it would not release him until the earth below decided it was finished. Defeated and shaking, the traveler returned to the inn, drawn back as if by an invisible pull, and opened the diary one final time. New words were forming on the previously blank page, ink appearing by itself in slow, deliberate strokes, describing his actions with chilling accuracy even as he read them. It detailed his failed escape, the sound of the bells, the weight of fear crushing his chest, and then moved on to what had not yet happened, his final moments. The entry described the exact time, the position of the moon, and the sensation of the ground opening beneath his feet, written with an intimacy that left no doubt he would experience every word. As the last sentence completed itself, the ink bled through the page, seeping onto his hands, warm and fresh. He understood then that the diary was not a record of the past, but a mechanism of the village itself, ensuring that nothing was forgotten and that every sacrifice was documented, even before it occurred. When dawn finally broke, it did so quietly, without birdsong or color, as if the sun itself were uncertain of what it was meant to reveal. The fog thinned and then lifted entirely, exposing a landscape that no longer made sense. Where the village had stood, its stone houses, the inn, the square, the church ruins, there was nothing but an empty field of flattened earth, scarred by deep cracks that slowly sealed themselves shut. No roads led in or out, no footprints marked the soil, and no sign remained that human life had ever existed there at all. Travelers passing through the region later would report only a strange sense of unease when crossing the field, a sudden pressure in the chest, an urge to keep moving without looking back. Official maps would show nothing unusual, only unnamed land, and history would remain silent. The village had fulfilled its purpose once more, erasing itself completely, leaving no evidence behind, except for the ground beneath, which lay unnaturally smooth as though it had just finished feeding. Weeks later, in a different country and under a different sky, a plain envelope slipped through the mail slot of a small apartment, landing softly on the floor as if it had traveled a very long way to arrive. There was no return address, no stamp to indicate where it had been sent from, only a name written carefully on the front in familiar handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper bearing a short message and a hand-drawn map, its lines precise and unsettlingly confident. The warning was simple and direct. You will reach the village before nightfall. Do not stay after sunset. As the envelope was opened, far away beneath the quiet earth of an unnamed field, something ancient shifted, patient and awake, already aware that the cycle was about to begin again. What you just heard is not merely a story, it is a warning. Some places are not meant to be found and some secrets refuse to stay buried. If you ever feel watched in the silence, remember, not all horrors come to scare, some come to claim. Thank you for watching Mystery Fana Official. If this story left a mark on your mind, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Because the next story might be closer to you than you think. Until we meet again, stay aware and never ignore the darkness.